Now, let's move on to another evil/liar, and that is, of course, the not legitimate leader of Venezuela, Maduro. And Congresswoman Maria Salazar said on Fox that essentially he's got hours, let alone days. So we watch with interest. This is a very, very fast-changing, fast-moving situation. America is applying a lot of pressure for him to hand back power, leave the country. He's so far standing up to that. We'll see how long that lasts. There's also, of course, a lot of pressure on the Department of Defense and Pete Hegseth, the Department of War, of course. Got to get that into my head, regarding the September 2 boat strike and the legitimacy of these kinds of attacks. It's a very complex field, and a lot of people will argue from a lot of different perspectives, but someone who knows this region, knows this country, knows how these things work really, really well is a former ambassador, an American, the American ambassador to Venezuela, James Story. And here's my guest now. Ambassador, thank you, first of all, so much for joining us here on the Erin Molan Show. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Have you been surprised, first of all, with the escalation involving Venezuela under the Trump administration?
Certainly. Under the first Trump administration, we talked about different things, different possibilities, different approaches. And this was never an approach that was really considered. So the fact that the president has latched onto this particular mechanism, looking at the cartel of the Suns, looking at Maduro through the prism of being a narcotics trafficker, is a bit novel. Yeah.
Is it justified, do you think?
Well, I mean, there are 5 or 6 different reasons why Maduro should leave power. The first being that the Venezuelan people voted him out of office last July, but he refuses to leave. The second is the largest ever migration in the history of the Western Hemisphere is happening because of him. So he's forced people into exile, upwards of 9 million of them. Just this week alone, one of the members of Maria Corina Machado's political organization, a former governor, died in captivity. He was a political prisoner. So crimes against humanity, human rights abuses, narcotics trafficking, destabilizing outmigration because of his failed policies, both economic and political, lost an election, and he's a narcotics trafficker. Yeah, I think it's justified.
It's a fairly compelling case, isn't it? He thus far is showing resistance. I was watching Fox News last night and someone said he had hours, if not days. Can you put a time frame on when you think this will come to some kind of end? He will either leave or something else will happen. America will go in, where there's talk about potential land strikes.
Well, I hate to speculate, and as a former diplomat, we're always really careful to say, well, on the one hand or the other hand. But what I've been saying for a few weeks now is that what we have in the Caribbean, the 10% of the U.S. Navy, all of the different assets in the region, we can't leave them there forever. In fact, the fourth fleet, the fleet in the U.S. Navy responsible for the Americas, has no organic capacity whatsoever. They have 0 ships. The fleet has 0 ships. So all of these ships are coming from other fleets,
right.
And they've all been planned and programmed out years in advance. So by having these ships and all of these troops in the region for an extended period of time, it would create some chaos within the military. And you have people who are due to rotate out, others rotating in. So I've been saying for quite some time that probably along the lines of 30 days, I would imagine something would happen before the end of the year. I don't know if the holidays is going to have an impact, or whether or not hostilities begin sooner rather than later. But what I think will happen will something more finite, a smaller land strike focused on narcotics traffickers. I'd even say south of Lake Maracaibo, Zulia State, where most of the drug flights, the air flights originate from that area. Maybe something against some infrastructure there. Yeah, I would imagine we're talking, I don't want to say hours or days, but I would say within the next couple of weeks, certainly something's either going to have to happen, or we're going to have to start moving some of those resources out of the region.
What have you made of the way in which America has taken out these boats with drug dealers, drugs, and there's so much evidence of how much damage they do. A lot of people use that to justify. Are you comfortable with the process, and particularly, obviously, the one that we in the public haven't seen as yet, but this 2 September incident?
No, I'm not comfortable with it. And I'm not comfortable with it because I think not only Is it a unilateral action that undermines our relationships in the region? We lose valuable intelligence. When I ran counter narcotics in Colombia, then later ran counter narcotics for the Western Hemisphere, you want to judicialize these cases. And when you capture people and you're able to interrogate them, for lack of a better word, you judicialize the case. You learn a lot about the organization itself. A lot of these people will tell you, well, this is the person who hired me. Then you go find that person, and you start to bring down and break down the organization itself, and it leads you to really bad actors, such as former president of Honduras Juan Orlando Hernandez, recently pardoned by the president. And this was a guy who, with his brother, was responsible for narcotics trafficking and money laundering with Chapo
Yeah.
out of Mexico. So it's from my perspective, I think you lose intelligence, you undermine relationships in the region, you call into question all kinds of international legal norms, and I don't think it's a very effective way of prosecuting the fight against narcotics trafficking.
That's a key point you make, and I haven't heard that made prior. It's not even that, from a moral standpoint, and that may be part of it, but it's just not as effective, you're saying, as if you were to do it the other way when you can get the bigger fish.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we have a program with the DEA where we can do genetic testing of the drugs to see where they came from. We can do the DNA analysis, so we know where the cocaine originated. This is extraordinary type of technology that we possess. Not to mention the little things, people make mistakes. So the receipt that we call a pocket litter, the receipt that's left behind showing where their engines were last maintained, the cell phones and sat phones that they leave on board, all the little things that'll enable you to put together a case. And remember, the narcotics trafficking organizations, they're not democratic institutions. They don't work by committee. They literally can change their methodology for moving drugs north like that. So you may see fewer of these drug boats going north, but that doesn't mean the flow of cocaine has stopped. The cocaine now is going in container ships, pleasure craft, airplanes, smaller boats along the coast. It'll move by drug mule and pack mule, people literally bringing it across the border and moving it north. So yeah, I don't think it's overly effective. I think it's not going to age particularly well.
Do you know Maduro? I know you just went through his rap sheet, which is, I mean, if you are evil, it's very impressive. What is he like as a person, and how do you think? What advice would you give to the Trump administration if you were still in that role that you used to hold, about the
Right.
best way to move forward?
I mean, I think he's a clever individual, not classically intelligent, but his wife, Celia Flores, the first combatant is her nickname. She's very clever. She's very smart.
Yeah.
He's definitely been buoyed by the Cubans. I did meet him one time when I was negotiating the release of American hostages.
Right.
And he spent an awful lot of time at the beginning trying to figure out who was taller. He was very, I'm like a meter 96. He's a meter 95. I think we spent a lot
Wow.
of time figuring that one out.
Okay.
I think that he's an accidental figure, accidental
Yeah.
president. Well, he's no longer president, hasn't been for some time, but
Yeah.
he was an accidental leader after Chavez. He's not particularly well liked in the military. He never served in the military.
Yeah.
He's an invention of the Cubans, and I feel as if he's gotten in over his head and doesn't know how to get back out. And he's also captured by all of the criminal networks around him.
Yeah.
And part of the criminal networks that have captured him, I would include the Cubans themselves. I mean, Cuba depends almost entirely on free hydrocarbons from Venezuela. And Fidel Castro once famously said, if I had the oil Venezuela had, I would
Yeah.
export the Cuban Revolution to the world. And now he does. I mean,
Yeah.
Venezuela is a colony of Cuba. So, I think he's looking for an out. I think he would like to find a way to get out. A lot of people don't want him to leave because of the criminal networks that are existing.
Last question. Chinese Communist Party is something that I focus on fairly heavily, and did prior to going more international when I was Australian based and had a domestic audience. It's a big deal for us, clearly geopolitically. It's a big
Sure.
deal for you guys, I know, in terms of, America says it's the number one. They benefit from any chaos in the West. We all know that. They play a significant role in what is going on with drugs, particularly coming into America. What is the impact on them? at the moment, and if Maduro leaves, and if America gains some control in the region, and the incoming loads of fentanyl slow down essentially into America?
Well, there's no fentanyl coming that I've been briefed on from Venezuela. So that's one area. And I would say that I think the Russians enjoy the chaos of having Venezuela more in this kind of chaotic situation more than the Chinese do. The Chinese made a long-term generational bet in getting in bed with a dictatorship that where the world's largest proven reserves of oil happen to exist, right? So
Yeah.
they made a lot of big commercial plays in Venezuela, and they got burned at every turn.
Yeah.
So I have watched very closely as Maduro has gone hat in hand seeking money from the Chinese Communist Party repeatedly, and he's been rebuffed every time. They owe the
Yeah.
Chinese probably north of $25 billion. I don't know the exact number anymore, but they owe so much money to the Chinese. The Chinese refuse to invest more money in Venezuela. Even the famous Tren de Aragua, the
Yeah.
Tren de Aragua was a project, one of these never projects, was a project that was supposed to build a train line in Aragua State. It never did. The people that were associated with it didn't get paid, and they turned to criminality. And now you have a transnational criminal organization called Tren de Aragua. It means the Aragua train that was never built, and it was money stolen from the Chinese at its moment in time. So,
Yeah.
the last time I think Maduro went to China, he started in Shanghai and made his way up to Beijing by train. And I would submit to you, at what point in time does a leader of a alleged leader of one country
Yeah.
go to meet with the leader of another country? But like, for instance, you start in Miami and make your way to Washington, D.C.
What it
That
says to
doesn't
me is
make
you're
much
not a
sense.
priority.
That's exactly what it says. Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny. The things that China likes to enjoy in other nations, they would never tolerate in their own, and that kind of incompetence. Thank you so much, Ambassador. I really appreciate your expertise and your time, and thank you so much for joining us.
Erin, it was a real pleasure. Thanks for having me.